is recording. There we go.
Oh, thank you, dear. Hey, Sherry.
Good morning, everybody. So nice to meet everybody.
And Shalvi, I didn't say hi to you. Hi.
Hello.
And you're recording. Awesome. That's great. I see the button.
Yeah, that's great. But Ron, I'm from Baltimore originally.
Oh,
That's where my people decided to settle when they got off the boat.
I like Baltimore. I've visited there a few times. I like that Bay Area. I like the first Washington Monument was built in Baltimore, right? At the top of
That's right. That's right, on Charles Street. And I'm so glad you like the Bay Area, because I worked for the mayor on the renovation of that area.
Oh,
It wasn't always nice. It was really bad. But
when I've
you
been
could
there-
walk on the water because there was so much trash.
Oh God. Oh, how awful. I took pictures of doorways. Baltimore has the most interesting doors. I have like 20 or 30.
And painted screens.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that's an art form that was really the Polish community developed that. But if they painted their screens, they could have their doors open and you couldn't see in.
Oh.
You could see out. So that, the doors had to be open for ventilation and in the summer, because it was so hot and humid there. But they made these really idyllic kind of pastoral scenes that had to do with the old country, not with the new.
Oh gosh, so is that in the commercial area? I never saw any of those when I was there.
No, it's in residential areas like on the east side where it's row houses and you don't get a lot of privacy. So it was really innovative, privacy plus airflow.
Yes, right. And art.
And art, well, it became art. Now they're collectibles, and most of the well-known screen painters have passed away and they didn't pass it on. But a friend of mine started the Baltimore Screen Society.
Really?
And the next time I'll bring a book up to show you. You'd really enjoy it.
It's fine. It's on the speaker, isn't it?
I'd love to see that, Deborah.
I'll bring the book.
And you said they're not doing, or there aren't painters doing it anymore?
You're not joining.
Not so much. No.
Too bad.
Like a lot of the, indigenous arts of areas, not in our area though.
Well, there are secrets in every city, and the rabbi's going to, I guess, divulge some of the Shema, but every city has a few secrets that are very worthwhile in knowing, and you may not know if you're not from there, I guess.
That's right.
Did you go to school in that area, to college as well?
I went to the Maryland Institute College of Art.
Hmm.
And then I went to Antioch, had a extension school in Silver Springs, and I went there.
Yeah, Antioch is my brother's friend from Albuquerque. Camille Allen went to Antioch.
Want to stop at the potty?
Great school.
Yes, they had some hard times, I think, but they're doing well now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they are well now, but they, all those extension schools had to close. But I think we're taking up time, so.
Yes.
War is rabbis.
Yes.
We're going to wait just another minute or two just for people to sign on.
Oh, okay.
Well, I see Pedro and I see Bob Biber. It's nice.
Where's my video?
I don't know. You're incognito.
Where's my video? Okay, wait a minute.
There you are.
Oh, that's scary. That's so frightening. Oh my God. Maybe I should I don't like to look at myself. Maybe I should erase the video.
No, keep it on.
You look fun.
I'll just look up at I'll look up at the sky. Look at one of you guys. You guys are a lot better looking than I am, for God's sake.
All right, everyone, welcome. Let's get started. We're going to cover I think, a very interesting, profound conversation today. So welcome. I'm Rabbi Rob Lennick to Temple Aaron's Shabbat Torah study. And it's good to see everyone. And so make yourselves comfortable, get your coffee if you like. And we're going to talk about the secrets of the Shema. And we should begin first saying the blessing for Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, O God, who sanctifies us, excuse me, with commandments and commands us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So let's start right with the words of the Shema itself. And they come from Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book of the Torah, chapter 6, verse 4, and words we're all familiar with, more than likely. And here they are in the Hebrew and
Yes, dear.
transliterated. I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves for the moment, if you would.
Thank you.
And here are the words. Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Words we're very familiar with. Now the Shema, let's unpack it just a little bit. The basic idea of the Shema. The Shema is often called the Jewish Declaration of Faith. And it's an assertion of the unity and the oneness of God, and it is the original assertion of monotheism. Monotheism is the idea that there's really only one deity above all others, as opposed to polytheism, which is the belief in many gods or different deities. And then, by the way, there's another form of belief called henotheism. Henotheism is the belief that your God is superior to the others. So henotheism acknowledges the existence of other gods, but you believe yours is superior. And in fact, if we read the Torah carefully, we see that's actually how Abraham started out. And even the writers of the Torah started out that way. There's an acknowledgement of other deities throughout the 5 books of Moses. The deities like Baal and Peor and others. Abraham discovers Yahweh, and the beginning of the story of Yahweh is that Yahweh is there asserting Yahweh's superiority over other deities. And in that sense, Abraham started as a henotheist in terms of henotheism. And eventually this evolved into monotheism. Monotheism, the belief, again, in that one superior only deity, and a complete repudiation of the existence of other deities forms the basis of monotheism. Now, some people consider the Shema the single creed of Judaism. And that's noteworthy because Judaism is a religion that is mostly defined by mitzvot, by deeds, not creeds. So you may have heard this said in other places. Judaism is a religion of deeds. And yet we have this one singular creed in the words of the Shema. Now, although it's an assertion of faith, Judaism is primarily a religion of action and not focused on belief. And that's important to emphasize because Christianity, in contrast, is primarily about faith, not necessarily about action or deed. The fundamental belief of Christianity is the prerequisite to everything else in the Christian constellation. Now, it's true in Christianity in addition to faith, to varying degrees, there's also in Christianity the concept of works. So a person's actions and deeds matter. But in Judaism, a person's actions are even more primary to their beliefs. So, for example, you may remember back in the day, Jimmy Carter, he made this statement about he had sinned in his mind. He had sinned in his thoughts. He had an unseemly thought, and he considered that a terrible sin. It was somehow, it was a reflection of the state of his character. In Judaism, we would never say that. In fact, interestingly, and this is a very constructive psychological approach to psychopathology, you know, we would not say if you think, I'm not encouraging this by any means, but we would never say it's, if you think about murdering someone, that's a sin. If you murder someone, that's a sin. But if you think about murdering someone, that can actually lead you to not murdering them because you're thinking about it. And so we don't have many sins of thought in Jewish tradition, but we have many, many ethical and moral normative values that are strictly based on our behavior, on our actions. So, what's the place of the Shema in Jewish prayer? So, it's recited in the traditional daily prayer 2 times a day. We are commanded to say the Shema. Why? Because in Deuteronomy, after the words of the Shema itself, we have the paragraph, V'ahavta. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall speak of them when you sit in your home, when you walk by the way. And then it says, when you lie down and when you rise up. And based on that verse in Deuteronomy, following the Shema itself, it was determined that the Shema would be say when you lie down and when you rise up, in the morning and in the evening. And so the prayer book provides the opportunity in the morning service and in the evening service for saying the Shema Yisrael. Doesn't occur in the afternoon service. And just don't forget, traditional Jews will pray 3 times a day, every day of the year. It's also recited customarily before going to sleep every day, every night. And it's also considered praiseworthy to say the Shema before death, if possible. And in fact, in Jewish tradition, we have a ritual for the end of life. It's partly a confessional where a person, if they're able, can, talk with a rabbi and reflect about issues or regrets or confessional type ideas or feelings before the end of a person's life. And then we will try to enable that person to say the words of the Shema. We have lots of documented stories about the Shema being said at the end of life. The story of Rabbi Akiba, stories from the Holocaust, where the words of the Shema were those last words on the lips of our brethren. And it continues as a very important assertion, the meaning of which I think will become clearer as we look at this today. The Shema is also recited when we remove the Torah from the ark. It's also recited in traditional synagogues when there's an additional service called the Musaf in the Kedusha part of that service. And it's also said at the very end of Yom Kippur. We say the Shema 1 time, and we say Adonai Hu Elohim and Baruch Shem Kavod, and then we blow the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur. So the Shema plays a very obviously prominent role in our prayer. Now, there is a very, very, whoops, hold on, let's see. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So the next thing I want to just comment on the customs related to the Shema. It's supposed to be said out loud. It's not a prayer you say silently to yourself. And the reason it's supposed to be said out loud is it's supposed to clearly be a public declaration. There's also a custom to cover one's eyes when saying the Shema because of what's called kavanah. Kavanah is a Hebrew word for intention. So we cover our eyes when we're making this assertion of God's existence to enhance and focus our intention when saying those words. It can be said sitting or standing. And by the way, the customs on that vary from synagogue to synagogue and different Jewish movement to different Jewish movement. And, some of us, particularly from Germanic origin synagogues, grew up standing for the Shema and honor of the Shema. And in traditional synagogues, people often remain seated. It reminds me of a funny old story. There's a young rabbi comes to the synagogue, and the older rabbi is retired, and he goes to the first Shabbat morning service, the young rabbi, brand new rabbi, and they come to the Shema, and on the people sitting on the left side of the synagogue stand up to say the Shema, and the people sitting on the right side of the synagogue stay seated to say the Shema, and they start arguing with each other about who should sit and who sit down, sit down, sit down, stand up, stand up, stand up. And the young rabbi, completely overwhelmed by the situation, just didn't know what to do. So he goes to the retired elder rabbi and he says, Rabbi, what I need to know, what am I supposed to do? The left side of the synagogue stands, the right side of the synagogue sits, and what's the custom for saying the Shema? And then the young rabbi says, and then all they do, they start screaming and yelling and screaming and yelling. Rabbi, tell me, sage rabbi, what's the custom? And the rabbi said, the arguing, that is the custom. So, we have so many diverse traditions in Judaism and customs, and there's a difference. Let's make a clear distinction. There are laws, halacha, things that are mitzvot that are mentioned in the Torah, and people follow those to different degrees. Then there are traditions, which generally are associated with ethnic origin. There's Sephardic traditions, Ashkenazic traditions. And then there are customs, which are much more localized, customs that have grown up. The most common example of diverse customs is around kashrut, what you can eat, what you can't eat, when you can eat, when you can't, how long you have to wait, are often matters of custom. So sitting or standing. Another custom for the Shema is the last word, echad, which means one. There's a custom that you elongate it. Echad. Echad. You elongate it in a sense to a form of enunciating the word. And in fact, you don't just elongate the last word, you go echad. Why? To, again, try to, in a kind of alliterative way, show that echad, it's one, it's distinct, it's echad, it's one, it's distinct in the way we pronounce it to reflect the unique and only oneness of Adonai. Now, there is a beautiful midrash about when the Shema was first said. Now, we know the Shema occurs in Deuteronomy. That's where it's written the first time. But there's actually a story from the midrash that says the Shema was first said in a time in the book of Genesis. In fact, in the time of Jacob. Remember, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah were the matriarchs and patriarchs. And remember, Jacob, he was a fugitive. He stole the birthright from his brother. He ran. He had a very hard life. He was dishonest. Eventually, later in his life, he starts to care about other people. He knows that his Esau, his brother, is going to confront him, and he puts his family across a river and to keep them safe because he expects Esau is going to come and hurt him for stealing the birthright. And the night before he meets Esau, he has a dream. And in the dream, Jacob wrestles with an angel, a messenger of God. And the angel in this dream, Jacob says to the angel, bless me, bless me. And the angel says, I'm not going to bless you, but I'm going to change your name. And Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And I wonder how many of us really know that that's where the word Israel comes from. Israel is Jacob's new name given by the angel. And it's interesting. So when the Bible uses the phrase the children of Israel, they're talking about the children of Jacob. The children of Israel are the descendants of Jacob. And eventually the descendants of Jacob, B'nai Yisrael, became the people of Israel. And it evolved, the idea evolved from, first the change of an individual's name, and then talking about the descendants of Jacob, and then eventually Israel, the nation. So that's the. So Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and the Midrash tells a story before Jacob is about to die on his deathbed. You remember he blesses all of his children before he dies. He calls them all together. And the Midrash says, after Jacob blessed his children, he then said to them, my children, I am most worried that when I am gone, you will forget our God Yahweh. You will forget our God Adonai. Promise me, you will carry on the faith of our ancestors. Promise me. And the Midrash says that the children respond. And they respond by saying, hear our father Israel, Shema Yisrael. Hear our father Israel. Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. And so the Shema actually is presented in this Midrash as the words of children speaking to their parent on their deathbed and reassuring that parent that the faith will go on. So Jacob, who is now Israel, is fearful that the belief in Yahweh will be lost. The children respond like, hear this, our father Israel. Hear this, Papa. Adonai is our God. Adonai is one. And it's a very, very beautiful midrash we often use the phrase midor lador, from generation to generation. And so this midrash suggests that the Shema represents one of the first expressions of that idea of the promise of our descendants to carry on our values and our belief system. And I just think it's such a beautiful midrash. But now we're going to look into the deeper secrets of the Shema, and they run quite deep. The Shema is about faith, and in Hebrew, the word for faith is emunah. And it's not like, I have faith in someone. It's not about, I believe the sun will rise tomorrow. Emunah, faith in Judaism, I want to tell you, you may never heard it stated like this. What is the essence of Jewish faith? Jewish faith is being in the world and living your life in such a way that you can clearly say to yourself, relax, don't panic. Relax, don't panic. That's a kind of way to understand Jewish faith. And we're going to look at the Shema, and it's going to illustrate this for us today. Relax, don't panic. And so the Shema reveals a major theological assertion. which today we're going to unpack. And namely, here is the assertion. Saying the Shema ultimately is intended to shift our view of reality so that we realize there is no real darkness in the world, just a lack of awareness of the blessings yet to be discovered and revealed in all experiences, including tragedy, loss, and times when the light appears to be absent. So the kind of way of understanding the sort of the fulfilled experience of Jewish faith is when no matter what happens, you reach a level of understanding that even in the worst, in the situations that appear as dark can be, there's still always blessing to be found. There's still always learning to be done. It's never the final word, so to speak. And this is the notion of no matter how hard things are, relax, don't panic. One thing we can guarantee is change. And one thing we can guarantee is if we know how to look for it, we can find ways of growth even in those experiences in life where it seems impossible. That's an ideal of Jewish faith. I'm going to show you now how the Shema tries to express this. So although it's usually referred to as a declaration of faith, the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, teaches that the Shema is actually a formula that explains reality, and that it's a mechanism to shift the mind into a consciousness of unification. The Shema actually can help the mind recognize how unified everything is. And it's interesting that it begins with the word Shema, listen. And the word Shema, it's often translated, hear, O Israel, but the Hebrew lishmoa actually means not just to hear, but to hearken, so to listen. So the words are saying, hearken, O Israel. What's the difference between hearing and hearkening? Hearing is just auditory. Hearkening is listening with understanding. There's understanding involved in hearkening. So hearken, O Israel. And it points out that in Judaism, think about it, in our declaration of faith, we say listen. In Judaism, seeing is not believing. Very important idea. Listening is the medium of faith, not seeing. So, in fact, think about it. We even close our eyes to realize God cannot be seen as we see each other. So that belief is not about seeing, but rather Judaism is trying to point us to understand that God can be discerned with listening, but not with seeing, with listening. And this is a very unique idea because think about it, typical God aspirations reflect the desire to see God, or I want to see the light, or show it to me and I'll believe it. Seeing is believing. And Christianity is very much, in contrast, based on seeing and then believing that God became incarnate in the world, a view that is contrary to the second commandment, which says God cannot be seen in a physical object, any physical object. And that's one of the reasons Judaism differs from Christianity, is because we don't go by seeing is believing. In fact, we say, if you see it, you shouldn't believe it. Because if you see it and someone says it's God, it's likely an idol. It's not the real thing. So there's a story about a tzaddik, a very, very wise and learned rabbi who wanted to fulfill the obligation to teach his child the Torah, because parents are obligated to do certain things for their children. And do you know what they are? Parents are obligated to give their children food and shelter and clothing. They're obligated to give them an education. They're obligated to get them to a marriage chuppah, if that's their desire. And they're obligated to teach their children how to swim. Did you know that? That's in the Talmud. Teach your children how to swim. Why do you think they included teach your children how to swim? Because think about it. When swimming is a symbol of survival, exactly. And guess what? Think about it. The first time you let your child swim alone in the deep water, how does it make you feel as a parent? As a parent, it's the first example of letting go, really letting go. I mean, there are a lot of those. Your kid goes off to kindergarten on the school bus the first day. There's lots of these moments of, where we let our children go and grow and hopefully grow up along the way. And swimming is symbolic of that. And the lesson of teaching children to swim is not only important for children, it's important for parents too. So interesting. So you have a tzaddik who wants to fulfill the obligation to teach his child the Torah, and there's a yeshiva, there's a school not far away, and he sends the child to the school, and guess what happens? The child flunks out. So the rabbi's like, what am I supposed to do? And goes to the other rabbis, and the other rabbis say, look, your child is a dullard and can't learn. Okay, then you should go to the yeshiva and learn yourself. You go fulfill the commandment by learning on behalf of your child. So the great rabbi decides, I'm going to go learn, and he makes arrangements to go to the yeshiva, not so far away. And it turns out this yeshiva has a problem, a very serious issue. In the schoolhouse of the yeshiva, there is a 7-headed mazik that lives there. A mazik is a demon, a little kind of demon. Now, we used to call little children in Jewish and Yiddish, a little kid is a mazik. It means a little demon child. But a mazik in the Midrash is like a real demon. And this demon had 7 heads. And whenever the children and the students would go in the schoolhouse, the 7-headed demon would appear and it would scare them away, and they'd run out and they would have to stop the learning. Well, the head of the yeshiva heard this great rabbi was coming and said, well, maybe the great rabbi is so pious, the rabbi could get rid of the mazik. So they decided to set it up so when the great rabbi came to town, he would have to sleep in the schoolhouse. So he told all the inns, tell the rabbi you're all full up. If the rabbi's looking for a place to stay, tell him you don't have a place. We're going to give him a bed right in the schoolhouse, and hopefully, because he's so pious, he'll get rid of the mazik. And so what happens? The guy comes to town and no one will give him a room, and he's starting to get very upset. He's like, what kind of place is this? People are not friendly or hospitable. And then the head of the school says, Rabbi, no. We've made a special bed for you right in the schoolhouse. You can roll out of bed and go to class. You won't have to travel. It's the best deal in town. It's for free. We'd love you to stay. So they bring him to the schoolhouse and they say, have a good night. And Rabbi goes into the schoolhouse, and as soon as darkness falls, the 7-headed mazik appears. The 5 and 2. The 7-headed mazik appears. And the rabbi is frightened. He thinks he's going to die any second. And what do Jews do when they think they're going to die? They say the Shema. So here's what happens. So the rabbi goes, Shema. And guess what? One of the heads of the mazik disappeared. Yisrael. And a 2nd head of the mazik disappeared. Adonai, 3rd head. Eloheinu, 4th head. Adonai, 5th head. Echad, 6th head. 6 heads disappeared from the mazik with every word of the Shema he said. And then miraculously, boom, the 7th head disappeared as well. Now, why did that happen? Of course, the rabbi was a hero. He got rid of the mazik, and the children were able to learn without interruption. But everybody wanted to know, how was it that this great pious tzaddik could get rid of a 7-headed mazik with 6 words of the Shema? And here we go, drum roll. Now here, I want you to take a look now and follow my laser pointer. Here is the Shema as it occurs in the Torah. Literally a photo of a Torah scroll. Every Torah scroll is written in the same way. And you can see the words Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. There's the Shema. But if you look closely, you will see that there is a seventh word, and it is an unspoken word. Here it is, Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Notice the last letter of the first word right here is enlarged. Notice the last letter of the last word is enlarged. We have an enlarged ayin right here, and we have an enlarged dalid right here. And guess what? They form the secret seventh word of the Shema. It's never spoken out loud, but it is implicit for those who know the secret every time one says the Shema. So when the Tzaddik said the 6 words of the Shema, the 7th head of the mazik disappeared because of this hidden secret 7th word. How cool is that? Now the 7th word, those 2 letters, all right? Now hold on 1 second. Those 2 letters form a word, ayin dalid, pronounced aid. And that word means witness. The 7th word of the Shema means witness. So most basically, what does this teach us? Even this so-called declaration of faith contains within it an action. And the action is to witness. And it teaches something fundamental in Judaism. Faith without action is simply an assertion. Faith without action is null. The question is, witness to what? And the Shema gives us the answer. Because the 2 enlarged letters can also be read in reverse. And when you read the dalid first and the ayin second, you get the word dea, which means knowledge. So the first way of reading the 2 big letters is witness. The reverse way of reading the 2 big letters is knowledge. Aid is witness. Witness to what? Dea, knowledge. Knowledge of what? So what is it a Jew is supposed to witness? And what is the knowledge we're supposed to eventually gain? And in Kabbalah, we get the answer in Jewish mysticism. This is now, we're going to the second part of the lesson. Kabbalah says there are 3 levels of knowing. We look at that word dea, knowledge. Kabbalah says there's 3 types of knowledge. And when we go through this, you'll get it right away. And it really makes sense. So the first level of knowing is called chokhmah. It's like when you see something the first time, you don't understand it, you recognize the potential, you sense what it could be, you see the raw material, you imagine the possibilities. It's the first encounter type of awareness. It's infatuation, it's wonder. It's the day I go and buy a guitar, but I don't have a clue how to play it. It's, the day I experienced love at first sight, but I didn't even get into the relationship yet. It's the day I, had a forest in my property and I wanted to build a house and I saw all the trees, but I didn't yet know how much wood could come from those trees. I wasn't yet even cutting the trees. I wasn't even involved with them yet, but I could see, I could intuit in a sense, the potential. And we do that all the time in life, right? It's like you hear a song for the first time and it resonates with you, but you didn't really get the words the first time. You didn't really look at the sheet music yet. You didn't even, you haven't even heard it hardly at all, but you heard it that first time. Say, oh, wow, I love that. I love that. That's what we mean by chokhmah. It's the first encounter our minds have with the world. It's amazing how much information we bring into our minds in an instant, even before we even understand it. It's like, I'll give you a perfect example. This is going to take you all back in time. But I remember I used to be a science geek when I was young and a math geek. And I remember, even though I could do math, when I got my first slide rule, oh my God. Now, I didn't have a clue how to use a slide rule, but I knew that slide rule was a powerful thing. And when I had my slide rule, and I got my first slide rule in all of 8th grade, I was like, how cool am I? But I did not know how to use a slide rule. And I didn't even have a clue yet about how actually mind-boggling a slide rule is and how frustrating it could be as well. But that's what is meant by chokhmah. That's chokhmah. Now, it's interesting to get even a deeper idea of what chokhmah is. The gematria of the word chokhmah is interesting. Remember, gematria is a form of mystical reading of Hebrew words through their numerical value. So the Kabbalists believe that two words with the same numerical value illustrate an implicit spiritual connection. And it's interesting, the gematria of the Hebrew word chokhmah, if you take all the letters in Hebrew of the word chokhmah and you turn each letter into a number, it equals 73. What's interesting is that the number 73 is the same numerical value of the Hebrew word golem, which means embryo or raw material. And so chokhmah is about seeing the raw material in the world. Now, the second level of knowing, is this all making sense so far? Yeah, it's pretty
Look at this horns.
makes sense. The second level of knowing is called bina. So we have chokhmah first, then we have what's called bina. And bina comes from the root word to build. It means learning through the details, the lessons of the struggle, what we discover through the struggle of living, the nitty-gritty of relationships, learning actually how to play a guitar, the ups and downs of daily life, the highs and lows of marriage, the things we go through that we aspire and we work at. And it's usually the bina, that is the most challenging part of life, mastering the details. And many get so engrossed in the details that they lose connection to what purpose they were driven by to begin with. Happens in life. You can also look at these levels of knowing as stages of the life cycle, because in midlife is when we do this, the bina, the engagement. And you see, at this level in the bina, there's always a risk of missing the forest for the trees, right? Like you live in that stage in the middle of your life, you're accumulating, you're working, you're achieving, and you can get so caught up in the details, all of a sudden you haven't talked to your family in a month. We can be blinded by the details and lose the purpose that set us on that path to begin with. We fell in love. We had love. We knew what love was. We had that infatuation. We got married, and then we got into life. And then all of a sudden, two people living under one roof, have lost their connection. It's like the bina, the details, although it's a necessary part of living, can sometimes get in the way. And it's interesting because this is the stage, in the stage of this level of knowing, when we get wrapped up in the details, it's a stage when people sometimes bail out and they give up and they feel defeated by the details and they lose a sense of purpose. But this is why Jewish faith is so optimistic, because Jewish faith is really saying, when we get to those moments when we feel defeated by the details, Jewish faith says, relax, don't panic. Relax. Just keep your faith in focus, and this can help. And then we get to the third level of knowing, and this is the most profound. The third level is called da'at, which you can tell is related to that second form of the two letters dea, da'at, dea, in the hidden word. Da'at is when knowledge and experience become internalized. The original potential and the knowledge of the details come together within oneself. It's the stage when we have clarity about ourselves and the world, when we are able to do things correctly without thinking, when we become integrated as persons. And that's like the point where I bought the guitar, I've played it for 35 years. I'll give you a perfect example. You know, I'll use the guitar. I started playing guitar at 9 years old. I got this little teeny weeny guitar and I played guitar all my life. I took a few lessons and I learned from other players and I played and played and played and played. About 7 years ago, I tried something I had never done. I decided I was going to do an improvisation on my guitar. And I plugged my guitar into a recorder, and for 24 minutes, I did an improvisation. I just played the instrument as I felt the instrument, and had this experience of synthesizing all my songs I had ever learned and different things with the guitar. And that was like an example with my guitar of da'at. And it actually wasn't half bad. It turned out actually not so bad. We have those experiences when all of our challenges, the things that we've struggled with, the things we've overcome, our initial impressions get synthesized and they become a part of us. You know, people hopefully in relationships achieve that, where it's like, why do you love me? Like, remember from Fiddler on the Roof, do you love me? And the first answer is the answer from Bina. She says, well, she says, I wash for you, I clean for you, I cook for you, I sleep with you, I look at what I do with you. And that's the Bina part, that's the middle part, that's the details of the relationship. But then there's, basically there's something more than that. It's like, but look at our history, look at all we've shared, look what we've survived. I guess it's not just in what we did, we're now a part of each other. We're integrated with each other. We can finish each other's sentences now. That's what da'at is about. But unfortunately, a lot of people never get to da'at because they get so discouraged. They get blinded by the details. They lose the forest for the trees in the course of life. So this is now here's the key. This level is expressed in an awareness that even during the wonder of Chokhmah, the first encounter, and the challenges of Bina, the details that can be overwhelming, every experience in life, every blessing or challenge has implicit meaning and knowledge to be gained. And I think that's a very profound insight about life. if we go through life and realize the most important things we can gain are not material things, but meaning and knowledge, those are the most important things to be gained. Then we see the world in a very different way. So the key to these three levels of knowing is, one, these three levels of knowing are built into consciousness. And Judaism says these are built into consciousness by God and reflect being created in the image of God. So when the Torah says God created humans in God's own image, it means this: God created the structure of our minds as a miniature duplicate of God's mind. And these three levels of knowing are one way to describe our mind and God's mind. And in fact, Judaism says God wants us to be living embodiments of God's mind. So God wants us to be a witness and to know this basic fact of all reality. God wants us to be living embodiments of God's mind. So the Shema is teaching that the Jewish people are the primary witnesses to the world, that the world itself and the mind are expressions of God. It's a hugely powerful idea. Once a person reaches the level of Deya, that highest level, in a way one can never go back, because the awareness of God's unifying essence within all creation, once you experience that, once you come to terms with it, that God is like at the deepest level of everything, your whole experience changes. Your whole perspective on life changes. If you get it, some of your anxiety should abate. Your panic should be reduced. And this is what I call mature theological awareness. It's not fundamentalism. It's a mature theological awareness that understands that, God's essence is not just in theory, but in a very real way embedded into all reality. So the words of the Shema attempt to explain how this happens. So the Shema says, Shema Yisrael, meaning Israel, pay attention, learn and understand the essence of reality. Adonai, Shema says, first
For some reason, it's
understand
not connecting to the Bluetooth.
the second word, the third word of the Shema, Adonai, says Adonai is transcendent. On the one hand, God has no past, present, or future. God is timeless. God is eternal, causing wonder without any understanding. God is hidden and concealed on the one hand. But at the same time, we then say Eloheinu. So here, let's go back through it again, walk through it. Shema Yisrael, Israel, pay attention. Learn and understand the essence of reality. First, Adonai is hidden and concealed. Adonai is transcendent. Adonai is in some ways unknowable. But at the same time, Eloheinu, from the word Elohim, God is also in the details of life and in nature. God is revealed in the workings of the universe with which we engage and struggle. God is in the diversity of existence. Elohim speaks through the details, which can be most difficult to recognize at first. Whoops. And then, eventually, we may come to recognize that Adonai, the transcendent hidden God, is actually within Elohim in the details of existence. And to really believe this, that the hidden God is manifest in all the details of life, even when we don't see it, to really believe this is what we mean by emunah as an act of Jewish faith. And the Shema then comes to an end and it says, Adonai Echad, Why does it say Adonai again? To remind us that while Adonai is on the one hand transcendent and hidden, at the same time, Adonai is also at one with all existence. So if we realize this, it will shift our view of reality so that we realize there is no real darkness in the world, just a lack of awareness of the blessings yet to be discovered, of the knowledge yet to be revealed in all experiences, even in tragedy and loss, and in times when the light appears to be absent. As Rabbi Katz, one of my teachers, put it, if we have this awareness that the Shema is suggesting, when we, in the midst of our lives, are placing a period in the story of our lives at moments of doubt, abandonment, or perceived failure, if we have this awareness, we realize that even though we may be putting a period, God is putting a comma. God's putting a comma, even if we think we're making a period. He taught the Shema asserts the idea that when it comes to our lives, we should let God finish the sentence, which is a very beautiful idea. And it's this idea that we don't always see all the potential, and we can get caught up in the details and lose sight of the big picture. And saying the Shema is supposed to shift our minds back to the big picture. So how often do we think the story is done when it's not? You have to remember, darkness is just one word in the vocabulary of life. It's not the whole story. So the reason the Shema begins with the word listen is because when people panic, they stop listening. And when times are hard and people are driven by fear, people stop listening. And the idea here is that we say the Shema, it's a recognition, it's a formula for us to never forget that the hidden God is actually in the midst of all the details of life. And that because of that, we never have to feel hopeless, that our life always continues with a comma. And we just have to open our eyes to see it. Finally, the second use of the word Adonai, Adonai Echad, means God is one and in us. Or in other words, godliness is within us by design. Adonai Echad means we are one with God. God is one. We are one with God. And it suggests that humanity, the human species, and that actually all creatures are a revelation of the divine, of God. So we see then that the Shema is much more than simply an assertion of monotheistic faith. It holds a key to understanding the divine nature and unity of all existence. The great spiritual insight to be learned through life is, I had fun when it occurred to me, God, not the devil, is in the details. God, not the devil, is in the details. And therefore, Judaism says, so we should relax a little. Close your eyes and listen, and you will hear the universal melody of love that God has infused into all life and existence. Amen. Now I want to open it up for questions and comments. I'm going to by the way, next month we're going to talk about the Messiah in Judaism. Now I'm going to take that away, and thank you for listening to this very important sharing of the profound meaning and secrets of the Shema. What do y'all think?
Should we say the Shema during the day as well, just as a recitation for what we believe?
Yes, and in fact, it's often used in this sense, although not always explained in this depth, as a mantra, very similarly, but now maybe with this awareness, you can say it, and it will center you to recognize when you're in the midst of the crud of life. It'll help you remember even God's there too, even if I don't see it right now.
I like it.
What do you all think?
That was amazing.
Excellent.
That my mind is blown.
I love it.
Yeah, very, very, very powerful. Thank you.
I didn't realize the Shema was that short phrase meant so much
Oh yeah.
and so much detail in one short phrase that now I've been saying it for years. I've been saying it wrong because at night, sometimes I'll be in bed before I fall asleep, and I'm in bed already. I'll say the Shema and I'll say the whole thing. The completely. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Mahoto L'Olam Va'ed, the whole thing. And so I've been saying it wrong, and I haven't been saying it publicly because I'm alone.
Oh, it doesn't mean public in front of others. It just means out loud.
Oh, okay.
So you haven't been doing it wrong. There's no right or wrong. That's the thing. It's like you say it in a way that means most for you.
So can you say the whole thing, or is it too long? Like completely?
You can say Shema, you can say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. You can stop there. You can elongate the D at the end.
Mm.
You can do the response, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. That response was added to the prayer book because when they said the Shema in ancient times, that was what the people said when they were gathered. That was the response of the people, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Eventually, over history, in the synagogue, in most synagogues other than Reform, that line is said quietly, almost silently, after saying the Shema out loud. So the second line shouldn't overpower the main line. Except once during the year, we say Baruch Shem Kavod very loudly, and that's at the end of Yom Kippur.
And do you say Modeh Ani before the morning Shema?
You do. Yes, Modeh Ani, the prayers upon awakening, are said first, and then the Shema occurs in the Shacharit in the morning service, after the Baruch Hu. And then the Shema, of course, remember, the Shema is technically not just that first line that we focused on today, but it's also the V'ahavta, you shall love the Lord your God. It also then continues with a section from Deuteronomy that talks about that if you follow the commandments, you'll get rain in your seasons. And then there's a third paragraph in the prayer book now, traditional prayer book, of the tzitzit, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Lemor, that the Israelites should wear fringes on their garments.
Mm-hmm.
So those sections, the first statement, the Shema Yisrael, the V'ahavta, V'haya'im Shemoah, about rain and seasons, and Vayomer Adonai, about the tzitzit, those are in traditional Judaism called Kriyat Shema, the Shema and her blessings, so to speak. And it's the four total parts. Those are usually read in the morning in the prayer book in traditional Judaism and read in the evening in the prayer book in traditional Judaism.
Thank you.
Rabbi, how do you not argue, but how do you tell someone who believes that because of the word Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, for us or for me and for others not Jewish, they may feel that we're just talking about Jews or just Israelis or Israelites, Adonai Eloheinu, as opposed to Adonai Shekulam. How do you state that to someone who's non-Jewish or non-practicing?
What you do is you say, God has many attributes. and the different names of God suggest those different attributes. In the Shema, when we say Adonai the first time, it's only saying Shema Yisrael because Israel's being asked to be a role model of this understanding, saying, hearken, O Israel, in parentheses, you need to do this so the world can learn from you. Adonai, God exists in one way, in a very concealed, mysterious way, like God on high, the God we don't see. But the word Eloheinu is referring to Elohim, which is a different name of God. It's Elohim is plural. It's the God of many attributes, which is why we say it means the God of the details, the God of many people, many places, many stories, many facts, many details. It's the God of all the earth. It's God manifested in all of creation. That's why it's Elohim, plural. And so Shema Yisrael, people can think, Hear, O Israel, meaning, this is just for Israel. It's not. Shema Yisrael, and I don't believe in the notion of chosenness. I don't like it because it casts a sense that we're superior, and I don't think that helps us or anybody. But Shema Yisrael means hearken, meaning learn this, Israel. Because through you, the world can learn that the God that is in heaven is the same God in the details of everybody's lives. And we should understand and have faith that in the details of life, when times are the hardest, God is not absent. God is actually present, even in the details. That's intended to be a very universal message. I think what differentiates us, particularly from Christians, is that when we say God is in the details, we say that as a very expansive idea. God is in all the details. That is to say, God is in every single person. God is, the divinity of God is manifested in every living cell, in every law of nature. That's different than what Christianity says, that God made a decision at a point in time and decided to become God incarnate walking on this planet. And Jews will never follow that belief. I mean, a Jew could choose to follow that belief, but then they're not a Jew anymore. They're a Christian. And look, it's like, who am I to say, and this is where I believe in multiple covenants. Who am I to say? I suppose it's possible. And we're going to look at this next time. We're going to talk about the Messiah and Judaism. And I'm going to show you in detail what we believe and what we don't believe about the Messiah. And some of it is related to this very question. We believe God is inherent in existence, embedded in all existence. But that's different to say God is then limited to a particular human image or a particular stone image or a particular pictorial image. We say God can't be contained that way. God, and it sounds like a contradiction, God can be embedded in everything, but in this physical realm, God cannot be contained in one thing. God is in everything, but in no one thing. Sounds like a contradiction, but that's what we teach. That's what we believe. God is embedded in everything, but is not containable in one thing or one person, like a Jesus of Nazareth or anyone else for that matter. But Christianity proposed that God changed God's mind about that. And God said, I gave the Torah to the Jewish people, and and that's the word. That's my incarnation. I do it through words. I come into the world through words, through naming things, through science, through learning. I come into the world through the application of the mind, which is I gave humans a piece of my mind, literally, and that's how I come into the world, through human agency. And that applies to every human, right? Whereas Christianity argues God said at one point in time, the word's not working for everybody. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the Torah and I'm going to embody it in a man. And I'm going to take this Jesus guy and I'm going to turn Jesus into like a living Torah, like the living version. It's like, I don't mean this to denigrate Christianity, but there's the book and then there's the video. It's like the book version God gave to the Jews. And then there's this embodied human version. I don't go by it. I don't believe it. But am I willing? Do I know God's mind so much that I'm willing to say God would absolutely not make another covenant with another group of people? I think I don't agree with that covenant. I don't live with that covenant. But could God have made a different covenant for Christians and a different covenant for Buddhists and a different covenant for Hindus and a whole range of paths to the top of the mountain, a whole array of languages of faith through which to achieve a sense of communion with the divine, all sort of trying to express mystical ideas? Yeah, I actually believe that. Just like I don't think there's one primary tree in this world and one primary creature. We have how many different types of trees are in the world? We should say one tree is the only tree? Makes no sense. So why would we argue that in the name of religion? So I believe in a universalistic God that gets expressed in different languages. And I think when Christians hear us talk about the Shema, I think we just have to let them know that the God we are talking about is a God that embraces all of existence and the details of everyone's lives, no matter what religion they profess. And I think that's why when you hear the deeper message of the Shema, it resonates so loudly, because there's nothing about it that's innately like Jewish, but it feels innately meaningful and inclusive. It's a very inclusive idea of God.
Rabbi,
Yep.
I have a question, sort of like, and you're absolutely correct. I completely agree with you in that God is in everything, including the very basic building blocks of life. And the sense that he can't be contained is completely correct. I think you can't contain him in everything. The problem becomes that I find sometimes is when I'm thinking about this, I'm saying to myself, does God change? Does God change? For example, Christians claim that Jesus is God. Okay, so they went ahead and changed. They, not God, they went ahead and changed Judaism, and then they got changed on by the Mormons and by the Muslims and everybody else. And if I talk to some people about religion, because this is the Bible Belt, so and they'll say, well, God doesn't change his mind. And so, well, wait a minute. If you look at the, you don't say he changed his mind.
Christianity is a fundamental Christian assertion that God changes God's mind.
Bingo.
Right. But the thing is, Christianity, and there are different versions of the argument across the different strands of Christianity, but Christianity will argue that, and this is why Christians were hard pressed to include what they call the Old Testament in the Christian Bible, because they wanted to be able to go back to the God of the Israelites and read the writings of Hebrew prophets and say, but you see, this wasn't a change at all. God was talking about Jesus back in Isaiah, and God was talking about Jesus back with Adam and Eve, and God was talking about Jesus back with, with Abraham and the binding of Isaac. And so they do what's called, they retrospect the Hebrew scriptures as a form of, to create proof texts that in fact, God really didn't change God's mind. This was all supposed to be from the beginning. But, and I've done interfaith Bible study. It's actually been fascinating experiences where I've been willing to take on Christian pastors. And I say take on because they're not used to really being challenged from a Hebrew literary point of view. And I'll read those sections they utilize to retrospect God's purpose to serve the ends of Christianity. And I'll say, but it doesn't say that. Here's what it says. Here's what the Hebrew says. Here's what the Hebrew says. Here's what the prophet was saying. Here's the context in which the prophet was saying it. Here's why the prophet was saying it. You're free to add levels of interpretation as you wish, but I'm going to be an authority on telling you what it meant when it was said and when it was written. And so Christianity, and also there's a notion in Christianity, and it's interesting. It's kind of, there's an irony in that for the most part, the Jesus character is this very humanistic, tolerant, very inclusive character, and yet they developed Christianity in some ways to be very rigid on certain issues of faith. And they base it on, certain phrases, particularly most importantly from the book of John, that they utilize, and they read it as fundamentalists. So they're immutable statements from God. And they, from that, derive some ideas that when they talk about God being omnipotent and omniscient, all-knowing, all-powerful, and then omnipresent and timeless, eternal, they interpret that to mean God doesn't change. Because if God changes, then what do we end up with from that point of view is a universe of moral relativism. And that's one of the biggest fears if you listen to fundamentalist Christians. Even people who've translated their Christian belief into even white supremacy or into wanting to control social structures in our own country, and you listen, that you hear a lot, an accusation of the left is that we are the patrons of moral relativism. And we're not. I mean, number one, we're not, but we have a much more, I think, less anxious view of the universe. Like if you're anxious about the universe, then moral relativism is like, oh my God, life is meaningless. How can I possibly accept moral relativism? Whereas I look at it quite the opposite. I look at it almost scientifically, anthropologically. Like, humans have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, and we've evolved our notions of community, our notions of compassion, our notions of inclusion. Some people have actually evolved from a tribal mentality. Some people have not. The human mind is in God's image, meaning it's fluid. It's a learning tool, which means God is a learning being. And if God is a learning being, God changes. God evolves, God grows, and we should hope so. We should hope so. Because the Kabbalists asked the question, why did God create the universe to begin with? And it says, because in the beginning, God was everything. God was the sum and substance of everything. There was no room except for God. They call it the Ein Sof, that which has no end, the Ein Sof. Why did God create? It sounds so pedestrian. But God didn't want to be alone. God did not want to be alone. God felt the need to love and needed something to love and someone to love and others to love, and created a universe in which that could be manifested. It's a way where the God who's concealed wanted to get to the lower world, so to speak, and become part of us and part of a lower world, to expand God's experience, to have empathy, to grow, to change. And the Torah is filled with it. Abraham changes God's mind how many times? Moses changes God's mind how many times? God changes God's mind many times. God, the idea of a God that doesn't learn would mean that creation is ended. And yet
Well, their assumption is, well, he knows everything. I mean, little baby Jesus, from the time he was born, he knew algebra, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Hey,
That's their
look,
idea. But I
but
like what you said, that God grows.
God grows.
That makes total sense to me.
Well, to me is like, I couldn't believe in a God that didn't grow. It wouldn't make sense for me. Because then I'd be like believing in I don't know, I guess a rock grows. It erodes over time. The water erodes the rock. I guess that's a form of growth. Everything is growing and changing, everything. And I think God is growing and changing too. Although there are aspects of God, I like to say, that are permanently reliable.
Reliable.
There are aspects of God that are permanently reliable. I do think E equals MC squared is an expression of God's mind that Einstein was able to discover and make accessible to the world. And I think that's a reliable, unchanging principle of God's mind that is manifested in the physical world. But does that mean, is God going? I don't know. Is God going to change up the physical laws of nature? I'm not one who believes in miracles in that regard. I'm not sure I believe that, God willy-nilly is going to change the laws of nature in one situation versus another. I can't say it's not possible. I've had experiences in my life where things have happened to me that were 1 in a gazillion chance of happening. Couldn't have been a coincidence. Too many things were aligned at the same time for something to happen. And for me to say, oh, that was a funny coincidence. I step back and go, whoa. So I think there are permanent attributes to God, but I think God also learns and changes. It's probably best expressed that, at the end of the creation story, and I read the Bible symbolically more than anything. So you have this sentence at the end of the creation story, which I think symbolically is very, very important. It says, God gets to the end of the work of creation, and God said, this is very good.
Good.
Yeah, but God didn't say it's excellent. Like, God didn't even say it was like completely done. If it was completely done, why would God say to Adam and Eve, tend the garden? Because it was done, the garden wouldn't need tending. It's the whole notion that the covenant, the divine covenant, which God initiates with the Jewish people, but it's not intended to be limited to the Jewish people, initiates, is this partnership of creation to carry on the work of creation, to extend creation. Like my particular belief, when I say God is in the details, and I really do believe that. So, for example, was it just a pure accident that we discovered penicillin? Pure accident? Well, on the surface, it looks like it. We know the story. There was, an accident happened, and someone happened to notice, oh, that's a very happy accident. We can treat people with this mold by developing this mold into a medicine. But I believe that the pieces that caused that mold, that led to penicillin, I believe God put them there on purpose, hoping we would discover it, even by accident. So that, creation is unfinished. You think of things that, just look at some discoveries that have totally changed the face of human existence for the better, many of which have been discovered by Jews for the whole of existence, for the whole world. And that was people who could put together what at first looked like separate, unconnected pieces of a recipe, and saw those pieces and discovered a recipe of creation, and out of that created something new. I believe when we say God is in the details, God put all those, ingredients for the recipe in the universe on purpose. So the potential was there for us to discover the recipe, put the ingredients together, and change the whole world as a result.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That's what we mean by covenant in a universal sense. Oh, you guys got me going. Thank you.
A lot of questions.
If you don't mind, and I don't want to dwell on this, and maybe you explained it sufficiently, but maybe I just didn't.
It's okay. I might not have gotten it right.
Stuck in this question. When you say God grows and God learns, during what period of time? I mean, over the course of time, from his inception to forever in the future, or during our own lifetime, or is it metaphorically saying he grows and he learns within us?
I think it's all of the above. I think that God learns through all eternity. And I think God, although as a being, so to speak, exists outside the universe, because remember the Torah says, you can't see my face and live, like we can't be in the same space, but I can make my manifest attributes be part of your space. I can send emanations of divinity into this world. I think that God puts those in there and sees how it plays out and learns from it. Maybe God takes that knowledge. The question is, what does God do with this knowledge? Maybe God makes adjustments that we're not even aware of, or maybe God creates other universes that are better created than this one as a result. Maybe, contrary to the sort of deterministic view of God is all knowing and doesn't change, Judaism suggests something different. The rabbi said, all is foreseen and free will is given. It sounds like a contradiction, but what it really means is, so God can see in the scheme of the universe, imagine if we use the metaphor, the universe is a chessboard. Humans can, the grandmasters can see out 20 moves, 25 moves. They can see all 25 exponential combinations on a chessboard at any given moment in time, right? God can look at the universe and see the exponential infinite number of combinations for everything. God's ability to know all the possibilities far exceed that of any of us, right? So these supercomputers and eventually these quantum computers, they're going to be able to count possibilities. If you could combine all the brains of all the people in the world, they're going to have a machine that would be able to deal with the possibilities even beyond all that combined. God is like infinitely more than even that. But although God can foresee all the possibilities, and even in our individual lives, we argue just because God can see it, God can know all the forks in the road, God's foreknowledge doesn't determine the outcome. That's a completely different theological view. If you believe God's foreknowledge, omniscience, determines the outcome, that's what many Christians believe. God knows it, therefore it has to be the way God knows it. In Judaism, we don't believe that. We say God can know all the possibilities. God can even know Rabbi Rob's forks in the road for my entire lifetime. And I can get to the fork in the road and God's probably sitting there go left, go left, go left, go left. And yet free will is given. It's still going to be my choice. And God knows if I go right, this is going to be the next part of the matrix for me and can see it all. If I go left, God's going, oh. That's why, that's what we believe. So that God's foreknowledge is not deterministic of our choices. But what it does is because God can see so much more than we can, God is that much more loving and compassionate as a result. And I don't know if that, Neil, if that's really answering, it's a very hard question, but God knows, for example, if we take Einstein's theory and we apply it to splitting an atom, God knows before we did, we'd create atom bombs. Did God want us to create atom bombs by knowing that we could create atom bombs? That I don't know the answer. I know that God, knowing we could create atom bombs, did not necessitate that we would create atom bombs. It was our choice. Free will.
That's good. Thank you.
And by the way, God sees us create atom bombs, but God also knows what we didn't yet know, that by splitting the atom, in addition to the really cataclysmic outcome of that knowledge, we also learned things from splitting the atom that have saved millions of lives. But we had to discover that too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rabbi,
Oh, well, thanks everybody.
I
Any
just want
last, oh, you have a question? Yes, you have go ahead. Yes.
the way you've been talking about how God grows in relation, it reminds me of quantum physics. Like by the time you want to observe something, the fact that you're observing changes the object that is observed. The time of observation changes. There's an interaction there that grows. And it's like when I see it, it's not as if God is responsive, of course, to us with prayer. Every time we approach God with prayer, with thought, with trying to force our imagination to understand, God. I think there is that element of responsiveness, and we are shown how to understand God in different ways. Is God really changing at that time, or is there some sort of a closing, like a learning happening on our side that feels as if God is changing because God is that responsive, and I'm changing in the process? But am I really changing? I'm changing in the way I may be perceiving the divine, but is the divine really changing? I often ask myself that question. I mean, I follow you on all of this, but I still believe that, like you said, though, actually you did say that there's an element that is always the quality that is always reliable to the divine. Does that make sense? That
It
there's
does. It does.
of-
So that's a really important question. And let me share something with you. Personal. I was a full-time congregational rabbi for many, many, many years. And then in 2014, I decided to retire from that. I had done national nonprofit work before that. But I partly retired from being a rabbi because I had a theological crisis.
Mhm.
And the theological crisis that I had was I would lead services and read the words in the prayer book of this sort of, God that talks to people, and built on this notion that God is actually listening to my personal prayer. And that somehow my prayer, this may shock you what I'm going to say, and that somehow my prayer could alter the course of things. And I, as I evolved as a human, I stopped believing in that.
Mm.
And I felt like a hypocrite. And for a while I said, well, I'm going to lead services anyway, because I know people in the congregation believe in that good old fashioned God of religion, good old fashioned God of old fashioned religion. And it's still worthy to do this work and to lead public worship. And because who am I to decide what's meaningful for someone else? But after a while, I really became much more focused on Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism. And one of the lessons of that time period was that I had to confront the fact that no matter what the prayer book says, number one, God does not need us to pray to
Mhm.
God.
Yeah.
God does not need us to pray to God. And our prayer to God, in my opinion, is something for us. It has value for us as individuals to help us, keep divinity in our minds. And I began to feel much more comfortable with private prayer and prayers that I would express through my own inner feelings and supplications. And so I retired from being a congregational rabbi. Now I'm back. I'm back because since that time, I went through a stage in my life where based on what we studied today, the details were killing me.
Mhm.
And I overcame it because I found this insight in Kabbalah. And so I have a very strong belief in God. And I think prayer changes us. And for that reason alone, it's important. But I also think that while there are some things, aspects of God that are permanent, if you accept the idea that that human consciousness is like a droplet of God's consciousness,
Mhm.
and we know human consciousness is by nature aspirational, searching, hopefully for knowledge, is a pliable, the mind is pliable, the mind is adaptable, the mind is by nature like the seat of changing ideas, memories. It's like it's all about this sort of, I call it the emerging emergent. The emerging emergent is what goes on in our heads. And if that is a droplet of God's mind, then I firmly believe that's exactly how God experiences
Mhm. Mhm.
existence, just like we do. And that logic tells me God changes, God grows, God learns, and maybe even through us.
Well, that's something that I was trying to say when with physics, that we all change, except that that's a big question. What is immutable and what is in fact changing, almost as a way to make us understand more? Because it's all, I almost sometimes I think of it as like learning styles. Like we hear this, hear, O Israel, but then some people learn through audio, some people learn visually, some people have, they can, some people, different minds are created to absorb the same reality, but when we're absorbing the same reality, the reality is changed because of the way we've perceived it as well. And yet there is one overarching life reality and life force that is for all of us if we choose to understand that. Do you know, does that,
Well, that's what we've been talking about this morning.
yeah.
There is this one pervasive life force, as I
Yeah.
say, that has aspects that are permanent.
Mhm.
But this life force it's alive.
It is alive. It
That's
is
the point.
alive.
That's
Yeah.
the point, though. It's
Yeah.
living.
Yeah.
And, you know, everything ultimately is like, though we may not have fully proven it scientifically, you know, experimentally, empirically, but the universe, we're going to find out eventually, the universe is an organism.
Mhm.
And we're just at a level of it. We're at a level of it's the organism of the entire universe.
Well put. Yeah.
And so, yes, there's this overarching God, some of which doesn't change, is eternal.
Mhm.
But that's the sort of the inherent paradox, is that which is unchangeable is always fueling potential for change.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so in quantum theory, you know, the observer changes the nature of the observed, right? I would argue that I believe Kabbalistic Judaism says exactly the same thing about the believer and God. The believer changes the believed in.
Mm.
I have a question.
Which is like a way out concept. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. I didn't mean, were you done? I didn't mean to interrupt. If
No,
you
no,
were-
no. Go
No,
ahead.
we're done. Thanks. Thank you.
First of all, I apologize for jumping in and out. My daughter just got here from Maryland.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so I apologize for jumping up and down. But I was wondering about you earlier when you were talking about the secret seventh word in the Shema. Why would that word be secret? I mean, why would we not be supposed to say that? Yeah, I don't quite understand that.
Yeah, it's a good question. So first of all, most people aren't even taught about the enlarged letters, and that there's these additional two words, actually. There's the witness, aid, and dea, knowledge. I'll give you my interpretation that there's two ways to assert one's belief. One is audibly through language, and another way to assert belief is through awe in silence. I think that to be Kabbalistic about it, just in music, the notes, which are audible, are equally, you know, we tend to think of that's the music, but the rests on the page are sometimes more important. The extra quarter beat that you hold it out creates an impact in silence sometimes. And so I think the Shema is both visual, audible, and silent, to remind us that we have to relate to existence not only in terms of an active engagement, but also in silence, in awe, in wonder, silent, speechless wonder. And I think that would be a very Kabbalistic way of interpreting why we keep the seventh word silent, to remind us some things, they're just wow.
I have a question,
Yes.
and I've been, Zoom is very hard if you don't want to be rude and jump in. So
You don't have to worry about that here.
you never know when someone's pausing. or if they're actually done. So I hope I didn't cut you off.
No,
Um,
we're glad you're here.
This is Raleigh Dove, and I have thoroughly enjoyed and gotten value from everything you've said today. And I'd like to hear you say something about one aspect. I really enjoyed your idea of the Jewish notion of faith. I really like that. The don't worry, relax. I always need to hear that. So my question is one that I know comes up all the time in a post-Holocaust world, and much has been written on it. And yet I would like to hear how you address this. How do the people in the worst places in a death camp in the Holocaust apply this notion of faith in a meaningful way that can help them? How do they apply that? You understand my question?
Completely. First of all, in some ways, it is the most humbling of questions. In the darkest of places, first of all, why do some people still manage to keep God in their consciousness, and some people don't? It gets lost. And first, I just feel nothing but tremendous compassion for people. But the second part of the answer is, if you look at what we've learned from survivors, and so many stories that have been written about life in the camps, we don't hear about it enough. Is that in the midst of this, unparalleled human atrocity, there were hundreds of thousands of unsung acts of kindness that people did for each other inside those places. And people who sacrificed their own food, even their lives, to help older or sicker people stay alive. They did that because in many ways, for many of them, it was an act of defiance. It was an act of saying, you can do everything you think you can to take away my dignity. You can take away my name. You can give me a number. You can put me in a barn on a slab of wood. You can work me to death, but you're not going to take away my dignity as a human. And I'm going to prove that by still being good. I'm not going to lose the potential and the opportunity to do good in this world, even if you try to degrade me to the point where I don't care about the good. And there are a lot of people who were degraded and could no longer deal with any notion of goodness. And that, to me, is the saddest loss. But there are many more who didn't lose that and did acts of goodness. One of the best examples of this, I love this, is a little story about, in Auschwitz, there was a group there, and they would pray 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. And even though they were in the midst of the atrocity, and after some time, one of the leaders of the services said, you know what, it's time to put God on trial. Because how could God let this happen? This is unacceptable. God should make this stop. God should make this stop. And the story is written as a beautiful story. They put God on trial, and they did this like after coming back from a hard day's work, day after day after day. And then finally, on the last day, it was time for them to pronounce judgment. And the debate at the very end went on for the longest time. And it was almost time to say the evening prayers. And finally, they gave the judgment. They deemed God guilty of letting this happen to the chosen people. And then as soon as they made the declaration of guilt, one of the members of the group said, okay, it's time for evening prayers. And they turned aside and they prayed. So, what does that mean? It means that, we can live in the midst of the darkness but never give up on the idea of the potential for goodness. And that's how I would begin an answer to your question.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if that's helpful. It's, I don't consider myself a wise person or even, at all to answer those kinds of questions. What I do know, of course, I did lose family in the Shoah. What I do know, only from my own life experience, is that the well of hope and resilience runs a lot deeper than people often expect. And I can't even begin to understand. I have nothing but awe for people who lived through the Holocaust, survived the camps, with all that they witnessed and all the human degradation they were forced to be part of. And they came out and they've gone on and created productive, meaningful lives. But I have the same marvel when I've buried children and how parents survive that and how people manage to make life out of darkness. It's just a marvel to me. It's incredible. It's inspiring. To me, it's like that's where the silence comes in. It's like,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Any other questions today? Closing comments?
I think hope and faith, those words are the answer to what you said, to how we go on, even if we don't understand what it is. Those are essential things we must have. And the journey is about learning that, internalizing it, and practicing it for as long as we can. So I thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So next month, first Saturday, we're going to talk about the Messiah.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, we have that scheduled for April 3rd, and that's the weekend we'll be in Trinidad. So
I guess we'll do it partly in person.
do you want to do that in Trinidad that morning?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. We can do it at the temple. If you
Yeah.
want.
We have internet set up there now as of yesterday.
Yeah.
Great. Sounds good.
Well,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
You are also welcome. Thanks for listening.
And for everyone
so
still here,
much.
and for everyone
Bye-bye.
still here, we do plan on having Passover services, as you know, April 3rd. We'll be Zooming from the temple. So if you can make it in person, please register on the website. If you can't, just come to the station.
Register on the website.
Yes,
yeah, Temple Aaron. Here, I'll type
Okay.
it in for you.
Temple Aaron.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful to be with everybody.
Shabbos.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Good Shabbos, everybody.
You
job.
too. I'll stay on a minute if you want to take another second, Rabbi Lennick.
Sure.
Okay, you can stop recording probably.
Well,